Okay, so I'm going to take you through the first day when we learned how to solve a trig equation. Before you solve the trig equation, you need to pay attention to how many times you're going around the circle. If you'll notice on the very first worksheet we did Monday, in front of every one of these thetas is an imaginary 1. So all of the equations on this first worksheet from Monday, we're only going around the circle one time. So you're going to solve just like you would any normal equation. So on number 1, it says 2 sine theta equals 1. If I asked you to solve an algebra 1 problem just like this and said, how could you get sine theta all by itself? Most people would say, oh, you're going to just go divide by 2. So I'm going to divide by 2, and after dividing by 2, I end up with sine of theta equals 1/2. Then from there, you go to your circle, which I have over here, and you're going to go try to find out where on your circle do all your sine values equal a positive 1/2. Well, sine is positive 1/2 at pi over 6 and at 5 pi over 6. So we're going to write down both answers. So theta equals pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. Let's go try another one. Let's go look at number 5. So number 5 on the first worksheet for Monday. If I was going to solve this one for cosine instead of sine, we start off the same way. We get rid of the 4 by subtracting 4. And when I do that, I get cosine of theta equals 0. So I'm looking for where on my unit circle does cosine equal 0. Well, cosine is x, and cosine equals 0 at pi over 2 and at 3 pi over 2. So my answers are theta equals pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Okay, let's go do number 9. On number 9, when we're solving, the first thing we would normally do is add 1 to both sides. And we have sine squared theta equals 1. And that's not a big deal. Where people are having trouble in class is this next step. I have to get rid of the square, so we're going to square root both sides. And anytime you take a square root of a number, we have to remember the square root of 1 is not just 1. It's plus or minus 1. So I'm looking for where on my unit circle does sine equal positive 1 or negative 1. So I need everywhere where it's a positive 1 or a negative 1. Well, sine is y, so it equals positive 1 at pi over 2, and it equals negative 1 at 3 pi over 2. So again, I have two answers. So there's a few examples from the top of the worksheet for Monday. So now I'm going to go look at the bottom of the worksheet for Monday. And the only difference on the bottom is where it says to solve for theta between 0 and 360. So now when I'm going on my unit circle, I'm no longer looking at the radians. I'm now going to look at the degrees. So I'm going to go do a reciprocal function so we can see a different problem. I'm going to come down here and look at 15. So I see this word cotangent. And I'm not going to worry about the word cotangent until the very end of the problem. So I'm going to work it just like I did above to start off with. We're going to start by adding 2 to both sides. So I get 2 cotangent squared x equals 2. Algebra 1, no big deal. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And we get cotangent squared x equals 1. Still going to do it like normal. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and I get cotangent of x equals plus or minus 1. After I've solved the whole problem, I'm now going to go write this in its reciprocal form. So I'm going to write the reciprocal word. The reciprocal to cotangent is tangent. And then I'm going to write the reciprocal of the argument over here. So the reciprocal of positive 1 is still 1. And the reciprocal of negative 1 is still negative 1. So I'm looking for where on my circle does tangent equal positive 1 and negative 1. So I come over here to my circle. And you'll notice on my circle, out to the sides, I've written down what the tangents are. So I know tangent is positive 1 at pi over 4. It's negative 1 at 3 pi over 4. It's positive at 5 pi over 4 and negative at 7 pi over 4. So I'm going to go list every one of those. So x equals pi over 4, comma, 3 pi over 4, comma, 5 pi over 4, and, sorry about that, 7 pi over 4. So for this particular answer, I had I had 4 answers. All right, let's just go do one more. Let's go do a tangent. Y'all don't usually like tangents, so let's do another one of those. Okay, so we're going to look at 13. First thing I'm going to do, just like an Algebra 1 problem, is I'm going to minus 1 from both sides. Not a big deal. So square root of 3 tangent x equals negative 1. The number's touching the tan, so I'm going to remember that means to divide. And I get tangent of x equals negative 1 over the square root of 3. And we remember from the very beginning of pre-cal that we're going to watch our bad math manners. I'm going to go fix that. So I'm going to rewrite it by rationalizing the bottom. And I end up with negative square root of 3 over 3. So I don't want positive and negative this time. I didn't take any square roots, just the negative. So I go over here to my circle. And I know that tangent is square root of 3 over 3 at pi over 6. But that's a positive tangent. I want negatives. So you'll notice inside my circle I wrote down where my tangents are negative. We're negative in quadrant 2 and 4. And I want the ones that are at the pi over 6. So I want 5 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6. So right here my answers will equal x equals 5 pi over 6 and x equals 11 pi over 6. Okay, and that should help you get through the rest of the first homework assignment.